Part 21. Tomb Raider, Mary Shirley Young at the beginning. Author, October is fierce and cute. Chapter 202. Husband, what are you doing? Shirley. Yang asked curiously. Sumu did not stop, but took out a stack of yellow paper from the bag and said, "Didn't you say this is a ghost cave? Of course I have to get something ready to keep safe." Hearing this, Shirley Yang suddenly realized, and he also looked for something from the bag. After a while, he took out some black donkey hooves. Sumu couldn't help laughing when he saw it, and asked Shirley, "Take the black donkey, what are you doing with your hooves out?" Shirley Yang looked puzzled and asked, "Didn't you say you wanted to take something to keep you safe?" Sumu shook his head speechlessly, stepped forward and put the yellow talisman paper in his hand into Shirley Yang's hand, and then put the black donkey hoof in her hand back into the bag. Shirley Yang looked at Sumu suspiciously, but Sumu explained the peacock also said that this is a ghost cave, not a Zongzi cave. Your black donkey hooves are good for Zongzi, but useless against ghosts. If you want to deal with those things, these cinnabar yellow hooves are better. Talisman paper is usefulsome. Seeing Sumu and Shirley Yang preparing things aside, Hubei and Fatty Wang also began to prepare quietly. Originally, they would not have prepared these cinnabar yellow talisman papers before, but since after going to the tomb with Sumu, he began to put some things that could deal with ghosts and ghosts into his regular items. At this time, he also put some yellow paper with cinnabar talismans on it, as well as copper coins, swords, peachwood swords, glutinous rice, etc. All the things were taken out. "Hey, let me say, don't you not believe this?" Fat Wang bumped Hubei's shoulder mischievously and asked. Hubei didn't take it seriously and didn't pay attention to Fatty Wang's teasing at all. He said with a natural expression, "If you don't believe it, you still don't believe it, but you still have to be prepared, just in case." "Can it be used?" As he said that, Hubei raised his eyebrows and gestured towards Fatty Wang towards the dark cave. The meaning was obvious. Mi Nayuping had not prepared these things. He had a special bloodline and had some instinctive restraint on these things. Effect, but Sumu also stuffed a lot of it into his hands. After all, it is still possible to have an extra layer of life-saving means. Although Peacock put on the sunglasses given by Shirley Yang, he was still very scared. The dark environment in front of him could always putting away the shadow that people are most afraid of in their hearts. She moved slowly until she was behind Sumu and gently grabbed the corner of Sumu's clothes. Sumu was startled and looked back at her, one full of doubts. Peacock raised her head, her beautiful little face was full of panic. She said timidly, "I'm sorry, I'm afraid." Her instinct told her that the man in front of her was the strongest among the group, and only by staying by his side could she best preserve her life. Shirley Yang was also attracted by the interaction between the two. Her eyes glanced back and forth between Peacock and Sumu. Then she snorted softly, and then glared at Sumu fiercely, but she didn't say anything more. Sumu looked at Shirley Yang with a glare, as if to say, "You said she didn't like you." He looked at the peacock who was hiding behind him with a cowering expression, and then at Shirley Yang who was jealous but could not bear it. He swallowed silently, feeling that this was simply a sure field. Sumu said that he was also innocent. Okay. What can he do if others want to get involved? Although he wanted to coax his wife, now was not the time after all. Seeing that Shirley and Yang Liuzi suppressed their jealousy and did not show up, I guess it was because it was a special situation and she was taking care of the overall situation. She was also a good and sensible girl. Sumu wanted to keep Peacock away from him, and wanted to keep some distance from her, but when he twitched the corner of his clothes, he found that Peacock's grip was so tight that he couldn't pull it out at all, so he could only let her hold it. On fire. The flow speed of the bamboo raft at this moment has slowed down greatly compared to when it was outside. The danger that everyone thought has not yet appeared, but the tense nerves have not been relieved by this. Sumu felt that the peacock that had been next to him behind him slowly moved closer to him. He could feel that maybe because of fear, the peacock's body was trembling slightly. Sumu glanced at it casually. At this time, Peacock's hands had given up on his clothes, and instead grabbed his arms, holding his arms tightly in his arms. She raised her head to take a look from time to time, only to take a look and hurriedly buried her head back, and then held Sumu's hand tighter. Sumu felt a soft ball pressing tightly against his arm, and a faint fragrance gradually spread into Sumu's nose. The fragrance is like a light jasmine fragrance, but it also seems to have a light fragrance of rose, making people feel relaxed and happy when smelling it. This peacock girl looks quite beautiful, and she seems to have a good figure too. Tomb Raider, Mary Shirley Young at the beginning. Author, October is fierce and cute. Chapter 203. This peacock girl looks quite beautiful, and she seems to have a good figure too. Sumu cursed in his heart, scanning Peacock's body back and forth, and already knew that Peacock must have a good figure. As the saying goes, everyone has a love for beauty. Sumu felt that she was just a commoner, so it was impossible to turn a blind eye to the beauty in front of her. At this time, Peacock seemed to be frightened by something. He held his hand tighter, and his whole body was almost directly pressed against Sumu's body. The soft ball rubbed back and forth on Sumu's arm gently. Sumu couldn't help but feel a wave of dismay in her heart. There is a sentence in the original book, "The beautiful girl from the Dai and Jingpo ethnic groups is very slim and beautiful." Sumu couldn't help but murmur in her heart, thinking that what she said was indeed true. But the peacock looks very good looking, right? I wonder how the girls from the Dai and Jingpo ethnic groups can be any prettier than such a beautiful girl. Tisk, 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 if I could marry someone, my slender waist and skinny legs would satisfy me. Sumu cursed in his heart, but the expression on his face was still serious. No one could tell that his head was at this moment. I don't know how many times I have been to Chiuming Mountain. At this time, Fatty Wang also quietly moved closer to Sumu. His eyes did not fall on the beautiful peacock, but instead fell on the peachwood sword in Sumu's hand. The mahogany sword was half as long as an arm, and had a dark color. It looked completely different from ordinary mahogany swords, giving it a very mysterious feeling. Fatty Wang felt that there must be something extraordinary about the mysterious peachwood sword that Sumu took notice of and held in his hand, so he couldn't help but approach Sumu and asked, "Sumu, where are you, a magic weapon you found?" Sumu raised the peachwood sword in his hand and said, "This is what I found randomly." "Why so dark?" Sumu thought for a moment and said, "It should be lightning striking the peach tree." "Lightning strikes peachwood. That is the best weapon to deal with evil spirits like ghosts." Menjuping on the side hardly said anything when he heard this, and looked at the thing in Sumu's hand with a hint of meaning. Sumu was non-committal, but Fatty Wang was surprised and said, "Such an awesome thing." "How?" Sumu looked at the exaggerated expression with interest, waiting for his next words. "You said you are so powerful, but you are holding such a powerful magic weapon, aren't you taking the limelight?" Fat Wang rubbed his hands and smiled. Sumu was puzzled. "Why did you steal my limelight?" Fatty Wang winked and teased, "When a hero saves a beauty, he still needs to show off his strength, don't you think so? So this mahogany sword." Sumu laughed angrily at Fatty Wang's cheeky look and raised his leg as if to kick him, but he dodged it with a chuckle. "Don't even think about my sword. Once this thing is in your hand, it may not be useful in my hand." Fat Wang wanted to trick Sumu into using the lightning strike peachwood sword, but Sumu ruthlessly rejected him, so he reluctantly chose to give up. However, he still felt that the lightning strike peachwood sword was something that could save his life at a critical moment, and now it was used by Sumu again. If Muge holds it in his hand, the power will definitely increase exponentially. At this moment, Sumu is the safest, so Fatty Wang stayed behind shamelessly. "Fatty, why are you hiding behind Sumu like a woman?" When Hubei saw Fatty Wang's actions, he laughed directly. Fatty Wang snorted, rolled his eyes and said, "You know nothing. This is called seeking good fortune and avoiding harm, do you understand?" Sumu was speechless and helpless, and said with great disgust, "If you were a beautiful girl, I would definitely protect you, but it's a pity that you are a smelly, sweaty grown man. Hey, Sumu, I'm telling you, you're done." Fat Wang pointed at Sumu, and then complained to Shirley Yang's sister-in-law, "You saw that Sumu was in front of you." "Damn it, fat man," Sumu didn't expect that Fatty Wang was such a thief, and he actually learned how to complain to Shirley Yang. He suddenly panicked and kicked Fatty Wang directly. Fatty Wang stepped back again and again, and the weight of his body was there. These few steps made the bamboo raft shake violently several times, causing the peacock to scream in surprise and grab Sumu tighter. Shirley Yang glanced at Sumu and Fatty Wang, who accepted the snow. Li Yang's eyes were as sharp as a knife, and she closed her mouth angrily. Sumu felt as if a murderous aura passed by him. He smiled twice at Shirley Yang, and Sumu's eyes full of begging for mercy. Shirley Yang glanced at the peacock who was still clinging to Sumu, then glanced at Sumu who was pretending to be calm on the surface, but actually felt happy inside, pursed her lips and snorted twice. And then turned away. She knew that a man's bad nature will always exist no matter how good that person is. The only difference is whether the man will restrain him or not. Sumu smiled bitterly and said nothing. Continuing to talk to Fatty Wang, he stood on the bamboo raft and began to carefully examine the surrounding environment. At this time, Sumu recalled the plot in the original work. There seemed to be no ghosts in this ghost cave, but there are some strange creatures. However, these are just the plots in his memory. There may be slight changes or differences in reality. Everything has not been finalized, so we still have to see how it develops next, comma. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Tomb Raider, Mary Shirley Young at the beginning. Author, October is fierce and cute. Chapter 204. The laughter between Fatty Wang and Sumu just now relieved everyone's tension a little. At this time, the bamboo raft also gradually flowed from the initial entrance to a position slightly inside. The further you go into the cave, you can see that it is very wide and deep inside. Unlike the air circulation at the entrance of the cave, which is faster, the further you go inside, the more suffocating you feel, and there is also a very obvious corpse smell in the air. The smell is mixed with the strong smell of blood, and the messy smell makes people feel nauseous. It seems like this is really a corpse cave, Sumu sighed. Minayuping nodded in agreement and said, "And he's still an old man. This is a bit bad." Hubei frowned and shook his head. "What a bad idea?" Fat Wang asked. Hubei glanced at the increasingly dark cave and said in a deep voice, "Such a cave with old corpses has a strong yin energy, and it is easy for unknown things like sneaking to appear. What do you think? Isn't that bad?" Everyone heard this and expressed their approval. "Let's take a look at it step by step. There are too many corpses in this old corpse cave, and it is easy for things like corpse poison to appear. Everyone should put on the mask first." Shirley Yang was careful and took the lead in reminding everyone. Right, let's protect ourselves first, don't be sneaky and get killed by the corpse poison first." Fat Wang nodded quickly and said. He took out the gas mask he had prepared in advance from his backpack and put it on carefully. The same goes for everyone else. Everyone has always done a good job in safety protection. Peacock he also put on a gas mask, but still followed Sumu and refused to take a step away. "Isn't it too dark in here?" Fat Wang used the flashlight in his hand to scan around, but found that the place illuminated by the light was not very far away, and the visibility was not high. What Fatty Wang had in his hand was an ordinary flashlight. If used under normal circumstances, it's more than enough, but the environment inside this cave is too special. It gets darker and darker as you go inside, so ordinary flashlights are not useful at all. Hubei took out a wolf-eye flashlight from his bag, opened it and went into the cave. Shining out from the front, everyone saw only a clear beam of light, which was especially obvious in the darkness. Damn it, the visibility is too low. Fatty Wang looked at the beam of light and muttered to himself. You must know that the darker the place, the more obvious the shape of the light will be. Now everyone can see that the light has become a beam, which shows how dark it is around. Everyone, be careful, Men Yuping opened his mouth to remind. When everyone heard the words, they silently tightened the vigilance string in their hearts. The light of the strong flashlight can shoot a long distance, and it can also slightly distract everyone in the darkness. See clearly and understand the real situation inside. The bamboo raft is floating leisurely, and everyone looks with the light of the flashlight. They can see that there are many stalactites and stalagmites hanging on the top of the cave, and there are also many stalagmites on the mountain wall. From time to time, water would drip down from the stalactites. Sumu watched silently, but his thoughts were running rapidly. He found that the original cave in his memory seemed to be similar to the current cave. There are some differences in the place. In the original work, there was no such weird blood at the entrance of the cave, but it did appear here, and the cave here seemed to be deeper and darker than the cave in the original work. There seemed to be something inside. It was like something absorbed all the light, so that all the light could only be trapped within a certain range and could no longer spread at all. Sumu had given up comparing the original plot with the real situation, because he found that the two it seems that there are many differences between. Pay attention to your surroundings. If something comes out later, don't panic, Sumu reminded everyone to be careful. What did you say? Fat Wang tilted his head and asked in question. Everyone was wearing gas masks, so when they spoke, they all sounded a little loud. If you speak softly and don't listen carefully, you can't hear clearly. Sumu saw that everyone seemed to be in a hurry. I didn't hear it clearly, so I said it again. I told everyone not to panic. What? Peacock fragrance! Fatty Wang exclaimed, and then turned to Shirley Yang next to him. He didn't mind watching the excitement and said jokingly, I said, is my sister-in-law still next to you? Is it really okay for you to be so blatant? Fat Wang's voice was a bit loud. I don't know if it was intentional or not. Suddenly everyone's eyes shot directly over and fell on them. Shirley Yang's cold eyes swept over. Sumu, I just felt like I was going to suffer, so I quickly explained. When did I say this? It smells good to my wife too, okay. The peacock was so ashamed that he was almost ashamed. Because he didn't dare to look up, he huddled behind Sumu, just like a pitiful little thing who was afraid of being abandoned. As soon as Hubei knew that Fatty Wang was teasing Sumu, he just laughed twice and said, Fatty, are you sure you want to tease Sumu to death now? Fat Wang was stunned, and he didn't understand what Hubei meant. Hubei explained kindly, Sumu is the most powerful in our team. Are you sure you can wait for a while? Damn it, I forgot about this. Fat Wang slapped his thigh exaggeratedly, and then as if he remembered something, he pulled Men Yuping's arm and said, Brother Zhang, my safety depends on you later. Fat Wang was very affectionate, but Men Yuping completely blocked out those disgusting eyes. He still said with a paralyzed face, Sumu is more powerful. Ha 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 ha. Hubei smiled rudely, while Fatty Wang seemed to be petrified. Shirley Yang had already seen that what they just said was a joke. Even though she knew it was false, Shirley Yang still glanced back and forth at Sumu and Peacock several times before she looked back and looked forward. Fatty Wang felt extremely regretful at this moment. He looked at Sumu pitifully and said, It's not too late for me to say sorry now, Tomb Raider, marry Shirley Young at the beginning. Author, October is fierce and cute. Chapter 205. It's not too late for me to say sorry now. Fatty Wang looked pitiful. Sumu smiled coldly and sneered, and snorted, I'm afraid you have no chance. No. Brother, I was wrong, I really feel wrong, Fatty Wang shouted exaggeratedly, but the slightly curved corners of his lips showed his previous appearance, which was all done out of boredom and joking. Sumu ignored him and kept looking at the surrounding mountain walls with a flashlight. Fatty Wang was about to say a few more words, when Shirley Yang spoke. Stop making trouble for now. There seems to be something in front of you. Shirley Yang's voice was very heavy, and her words made the atmosphere that had finally become relaxed suddenly become tense. She felt that maybe what the peacock said before might be true, and there was really something unknown hidden in this cave. The terrifying secret, and they also broke into such an incredible place. As the bamboo raft moved forward, everyone finally noticed that just like Shirley Yang said, there was something floating on the water. When the bamboo raft got closer, everyone was shocked to find that those floating on the water were actually corpses. Just around the corner, the corpse was just soaking in the water. When everyone got closer, they discovered that the corpse had been soaked in water for a long time, the body was swollen and smelly, the facial features had become blurred, and the body was already rotten and dilapidated. Vomit. Although Peacock is usually a carefree, enthusiastic, and sunny girl, she has seen such a scene. When she accidentally saw the corpse, she bent over and retched to the side. The others didn't actually feel good about it, but they had seen even uglier corpses, so they behaved quite calmly. Are you okay? After all, Shirley Yang was the only one present, so the matter of comforting Peacock naturally fell on her. Although she was a little unhappy because Peacock and Sumu were too close before, she knew that Sumu was like this. It's impossible for a good man not to attract a few peach blossoms. After thinking about it, he looked away and didn't mind it so much. He stepped forward and patted Peacock on the back, helping her calm down and seeing that she had recovered. Only then did I focus on the sentence corpse. What is that? Shirley asked. A black thing in the water. Everyone looked carefully and found that there was a black hair floating slowly with the water. Scared me. Shirley Yang patted her chest and breathed a sigh of relief. However, this relief did not last for a few seconds. When everyone's flashlights were shining on the hair, they discovered that there was a person under the corpse. A stream of blood kept rising up. Because of the depth of the cave, the blood seemed to be dark in color, giving people an extremely weird feeling. Why is there so much blood here? Everyone was puzzled. Hubei slapped his thigh and exclaimed, I know. What do you know? Fatty Wang asked. Hubei thought for a while and said, do you still remember the large piece of blood we saw at the entrance of the cave just now? Fat Wang nodded. The red blood at the entrance of the cave was so weird that it was naturally impressive. Hubei continued, at that time, I didn't know where the blood came from and why it persisted. Now it seems that it should be here. Reason. When he said this, everyone thought it made sense, but they didn't understand where the blood here came from. Everyone, be careful. Seeing that the bamboo raft was getting closer and closer to the corpse, Shirley Yang reminded her again. At this time, the peacock who had been hiding behind Sumu quietly poked his head out. What's wrong? Peacock, Sumu asked a little strangely when he saw her acting like this. Peacock glanced at Sumu, then at the corpse not far away, and said with a slight tremor in his voice. I want to see, Tomb Raider, Mary Shirley Young at the beginning. Author, October is fierce and cute. Chapter 206. I want to see. Peacock didn't say what he wanted to see, but Sumu already understood, because after hesitating twice, Peacock slowly took off the sunglasses on his face. Everyone was a little surprised by Peacock's behavior. After all, Peacock had been scared to death before. Now that he was able to take off his sunglasses, he must have mustered up a lot of courage to do so. I saw the peacock hiding behind Sumu fearfully, pulling Sumu's arm and sticking out his head, looking at the corpse floating on the water over there. I looked and saw something, Peacock said tremblingly, and the vibrato in her voice made people feel pity for her. What do you see, Hubei? I asked impatiently. Peacock stretched out a green jade finger and pointed at the body and said, I seem to see over there, there is a black shadow on the body. When Sumu heard this, he also looked towards the corpse. He looked carefully but found nothing, not even the simplest black energy. Nothing? Did you read it wrong? Fatty Wang also looked at the position of the corpse, but he still couldn't see the black shadow that Peacock said was there. When Hubei heard this, he reached out and bumped Fatty Wang, and reminded him in a low voice, have you forgotten what Shirley Yang said just now? Peacock's eyes are different from ours, so they can see some things that we can't. Thing. Fatty Wang suddenly realized something and almost screamed, but he immediately suppressed his voice and said, so, there is actually something up there, but we don't know it? Could it be a ghost? As soon as the words came out, everyone couldn't help but shudder. Even if they knew before that this was a ghost cave and there might be ghosts in it, they didn't suddenly tell them that there was someone suspected of fooling around not far away from them. The existence of the black shadow should bring more shock to everyone. With this thought in mind, everyone immediately took their flashlights and shined a light on the floating corpse. However, except for a rotten face and a dilapidated body, they saw nothing else. Ah! Suddenly, Fatty Wang pointed at the soaked corpse and exclaimed, it's moving, it's moving. What moved? Everyone looked back at him with puzzled faces. Fatty Wang's fingers pointing at the corpse began to tremble uncontrollably, and he said in a panic, just now, I saw the corpse move just now. Are you being blinded by this, Hubei? I didn't believe it, I'm serious, I'm definitely moved. Fatty Wang promised that he was definitely not wrong, and he almost swore to the sky. Seeing Fatty Wang speaking so firmly, everyone felt that he would never lie. Then when he looked at the corpse, there was something in his eyes. With a little fear. Everyone looked carefully, and soon the body moved again in full view of the public. It was just a small movement of the arm, but it did not escape everyone's eyes. In an instant, his expression changed in shock, and a sense of crisis suddenly hit his heart. Could it be that the water flow caused the body to move? Hubei observed carefully and found that the corpse only moved once and then stopped moving at all. He couldn't help but guess this. No one answered because no one knew. Brother, do you think those are rice dumplings? Fat Wang came to Mina Yiping and asked. Among their group, Shirley Yang is from the Bishan clan, and Mina Yiping is from the Fakiu clan of the Zealing lineage. They have knowledge about going to the tomb. There must be many more people like them who are monks on the way, and they must know more about Zongzi. That's why Fatty Wang asked Mina Yiping like this. But Mina Yiping looked at the floating corpse and shook his head, indicating that it is difficult to judge. Everyone, cheer up and be vigilant, Shirley Yang shouted, then looked at the floating corpse and murmured, I always feel that that floating corpse is not simple. Sumu asked in confusion, what do you mean, Shirley? Yang thought for a while, frowned and said, did you see the way that floating corpse died? I seem to have read this introduction somewhere, but I can't remember it for a while, but I always feel that it is not simple. As she said this, Shirley Yang turned around and asked everyone, does any of you know if there is any explanation for the posture of this corpse in the water? What else can be said about this? Fatty Wang didn't care about this. Does this dead man still have to choose a good posture? It's not like a living person sleeps. Does this dead person think that dying on his stomach is not as comfortable as lying on his back? It won't overwhelm the chicks. When Hubei heard this, he laughed and said, maybe he really thinks there is a difference. Fat Wang and Hubei started a debate on the method of death of the dead body. Men Yuping and Sumu on the side began to think deeply about Shirley Yang's question. After a while, Men Yuping spoke up. A story. Once upon a time, the people were in troubled times and bandits were rampant. There were many water pirates along the waterways. They specialized in taking boats to rob passing merchant ships and fishing boats. A rumor about water pirates also spread from that time. A group of water pirates intercepted a merchant ship, killed all the boatmen on the ship, and even forced the ship owner to jump into the river to escape. In the end, he was drowned in the river. According to the average drowning person, death after that, they basically floated on the water in a prone position. However, the owner of the boat kept floating on his back, with his eyes wide open and looking ferocious, as if he wanted to vent his great resentment to the sky. The same thing. The water pirates thought it was unlucky that the floating corpse had been floating in the waterway where they were stationed, and ordered people to salvage it ashore. However, those who went to salvage it fell into the water for no reason and drowned near the floating corpse. Since then there have been rumors that the floating corpse is full of resentment and unwilling to rest in peace. In fact, most corpses generally float on the river in a prone position, which are normal floating corpses. Some floating corpses lying on their backs on the river are not easy to mess with. However, as long as these floating corpses do not take the initiative, if you provoke them, there won't be much danger. After hearing this, everyone glanced at the corpse lying on its back not far away, and couldn't help but feel horrified. However, as if everyone was not frightened enough, Sumu continued, actually, this kind of corpse is not the most terrifying. Count the floating corpses standing upright in the water, that's the most deadly thing. Can a corpse stand in water? Everyone was shocked when they heard this. Minayuping nodded and explained, indeed, there is, and that is the most terrifying corpse king of the Yellow River. Even the corpse fishermen dare not touch it. The Yellow River Corpse King? What is that? Underscore, comma. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Tomb Raider, Mary Shirley Young at the beginning. Author, October is fierce and cute. Chapter 207. The Yellow River Corpse King? What is that? Fat Wang asked curiously, and Hubei looked at Minayuping with a puzzled expression, obviously knowing nothing about it. It's no wonder that they didn't know, even Shirley Yang, who came from an orthodox tomb robber family. I only have some impression of this kind of floating corpse, but I can't explain the reason, which is enough to show how rare this knowledge is. It is not so surprising that Hubei and Wang Fati, two people who have become monks on the way, have no idea about this. The Yellow River Corpse King is a legend that once circulated in the Yellow River area. It is said that corpses will sink to the bottom of the river after entering the Yellow River. Generally speaking, people who die in the Yellow River will float up on their own within 3 to 5 days, but some will follow the corpses. After the body swells and slowly floats to the water, it will become hideous, with lips turned out, and it looks extremely scary. Moreover, the body is not floating on the water, but standing upright in the water, with only a trace of hair floating on the water. Not even the body collectors would dare to touch this kind of corpse. Minayuping explained with a heavy face. It was rare to say a long paragraph, but every sentence made people tremble. The so-called corpse collectors actually retrieve corpses on behalf of others and redress grievances on behalf of ghosts. According to them, this kind of floating corpse is not an ordinary corpse, but has been transformed into a kind of evil spirit, which is very evil. Not only that, these corpses standing upright in the water will always remain upright in the water. They will slowly move forward with the water waves, as if they are walking slowly. If you wait until the riverbed dries up to look at it, you can still see clear the footprints go deeper step by step, extremely terrifying. Damn it, so scary. Fatty Wang exclaimed. Sumu nodded when he heard this and said, there is nothing more terrifying than this. The kind of murderous corpses rumored to be are people who died in the river with extreme resentment. After death, their resentment is soaring, and they will desperately kill anyone. Those who get close to it will be entangled to death in the water. If you are not a very capable person, and you are willing to provoke it without dying when encountering such a vicious corpse, then you will definitely die miserably. Everyone knows that what Sumu said is definitely not alarmist, so when he looked at the floating corpse not far away, his eyes slowly became wary. Although this kind of upright floating corpse is not the most terrifying, it is not to be underestimated. "You are so awesome," Peacock said in surprise, raising his head slightly to look at Sumu and Mina Yuping, with a look of admiration on his face. "You actually know so many things, it's so amazing." Peacock actually knows a little bit about what Sumu and Mina Yuping said. After all, they are also a small town near the water. Occasionally, people will accidentally drown in the water. There are people living on the edge of the town. Corpse man, I have occasionally heard of this knowledge. Now that I heard that Sumu and Mina Yuping were so familiar with these things, Peacock could not help but feel that they were very powerful. "Sister-in-law, have you seen it? A love rival has appeared." Just when Peacock was expressing his admiration for Sumu and Mina Yuping, Fatty Wang carefully approached Shirley Yang and whispered. Shirley Yang also saw it, and with the help of mental construction, he was no longer as angry as he was at the beginning, but when he saw Fatty Wang watching the fun and not taking it too seriously, he suddenly got angry and said, "You really have a lot of time." "How? Aren't you angry, sister-in-law?" Fat Wang winked. "Tao Gan and..." Shirley Yang glared at him and hummed, "It's this time, who still thinks about this?" Fat Wang laughed twice and swept the light around, and accidentally saw the direction of the floating corpse. He was originally thinking about why he couldn't control his eyes. The position of the floating corpse was really unlucky, but when he was about to look away, he suddenly stopped. I said, "that corpse seems to have moved." Fatty Wang's eyes seemed to be fixed, and he said a few words to the side. Hu Ba raised his head and glanced at him, and Tao Gan said, "You took a look, right, Fatty?" Wang shook his head and retorted, "No, I don't have eyesight, and I'm not an old man in his 70s or 80, so what should I spend money on?" As soon as he heard the words, he casually looked at the position of the floating corpse. Sure enough, he saw that the corpse was floating up and down twice. He was also startled. When he was about to scream, he found that the floating corpse was only moved by the water flow. "Let me go, scare me. It moves because of the flow of water. Don't make such a fuss, you will really scare me to death." Hu Ba patted his chest and swallowed hard the shock that was stuck in his throat. "Is that so?" Fat Wang was suspicious, and took another look at the position of the floating corpse. He saw that the movement of the floating corpse seemed to be caused by being driven by the water flow. Hu Ba didn't care what happened to the floating corpse. In this way, Fatty Wang didn't believe that he had seen it wrong. Instead, he kept staring at the floating corpse carefully. Soon he found something was wrong again. The position of the floating corpse was already far away from the original position. At this moment, the floating corpse was still moving. Fatty Wang looked at the root of their bamboo raft, then looked at the root of the floating corpse, and silently calculated in his mind. Their bamboo raft was moving, it was floating in the middle of the river, and the floating corpse was near the edge of the rock wall. Generally speaking, the water flow would become slower at the edge of the river. With the size of the floating corpse, the slow water flow it was almost impossible to move it, but the most impossible thing happened right in front of us. The floating corpse was really moving with the water flow, and looking at the moving route of the floating corpse, it would directly block it if it continued. In front of their bamboo raft. Wrong. There's something weird about that floating corpse. Fatty Wang exclaimed, pointing at the floating corpse that kept floating towards their bamboo raft. His expression became very ugly. Hu Ba thought that Fatty Wang was making a fuss and didn't pay attention, but it was Fatty Wang's startled breathing that attracted Sumu. With Mina Yuping's attention, the two of them looked in the direction Fatty Wang pointed, and they also felt an inexplicable weirdness. I think what the fat man said may be true. After watching for a while, both Sumyu and Mi Na Yuping confirmed one thing, that is, Fatty Wang's previous judgment may not be wrong, and the floating corpse is really weird. However, it is not yet certain whether the floating corpse is a Zongzi wanted to attack them, but the floating corpse was pushed for other reasons and chased towards their bamboo raft. If the floating corpse moves like this, it will collide with our bamboo raft. Mi Na Yuping said in a deep voice, with such convincing power that even Hu Bei and the others, who had always thought that Fatty Wang was joking, began to think seriously. So what should we do now? Tomb Raider, Mary Shirley Young at the beginning. Author, October is fierce and cute. Chapter 208. So what should we do now? Peacock was extremely nervous. She had seen a dark shadow on the floating corpse that frightened her before, so she was actually very resistant to the floating corpse in her heart. Now she heard that the floating corpse might get stuck. On their way forward, I felt extremely anxious. How about we just strike first? Fatty Wang asked tentatively. Hu Bei glanced at him and said, "Tell me, how do you strike first?" Fatty Wang thought for a while, then looked at the floating corpse that was still moving, and said, "Just use the pennant to poke it open." Hu Bei rolled his eyes and said, "This method is possible, but have you ever thought about what to do if it's a Zongzi? I accidentally got dragged into the water by it." And did you see the posture of the floating corpse? It was a floating corpse lying on its back. Even if it wasn't just a rice dumpling, it would still be something not easy to mess with. Fatty Wang hesitated and said, "It can't be such a coincidence, right?" After a second thought, I thought it might be such a coincidence. I felt that something was wrong with the floating corpse before, and it might not be a rice dumpling. It's always better to be careful. So what do you think we should do? Fat Wang scratched his head and asked. Hu Bei touched his chin and began to think deeply when he heard the words. Mi Na Yuping looked at the front with a thoughtful expression and said nothing. Shirley Yang said tentatively, "Otherwise, take the yellow talisman first. Test it with paper, or test it with a black donkey's hoof. Then we can only wait for the floating corpse to float over. Such a disgusting thing, we should keep it away from our bamboo raft, right?" "I reject," Peacock said cautiously, that although she couldn't help, she still wanted to give her opinion. Everyone discussed how to stop the floating corpse, or directly redirect the floating corpse, but they couldn't come up with a suitable solution after much discussion. The main reason was that there were no handy tools around them, and there was no one around who could stop the floating corpse. The diversion is a fork in the road, so it's difficult to do. Sumyu listened to their discussion, but kept paying attention to the movement of the floating corpse. Suddenly, Sumyu seemed to notice something was different. In Sumyu's eyes, the floating corpse could be clearly seen by Sumyu, who had night eyes, even if it was in the dark. After observing it for a while, Sumyu also saw something was wrong with the floating corpse. Generally, when things floating on the water surface move, the object itself will not make much movement. The movement of the object is also due to being dragged by the water flow, but the floating corpse is very strange. Its body is lying on its back on the floating surface, with its limbs wide open and drifting with the tide like a light rag bag. Only those with night eyes can survive in the dark environment. Only when Sumyu could see clearly could he realize that every time the floating corpse drifted a little distance with the running water, its entire body would sink slightly, but soon it would seem to be pushed by something. Yes, it immediately emerged from the water again. What happened? Sumyu frowned and looked into the water under the floating corpse. Due to the light in the cave, the water seemed very deep. Even Sumyu's eyes could not see clearly what was going on in the water. He watched carefully and waited. When the floating corpse dived down again but was pushed up again, Sumyu's eyes suddenly froze, and he finally saw what he was waiting for. It was a black figure, moving very fast under the water, it flashed through the water in almost the blink of an eye. Sumyu's eyes narrowed, and his heart sank. Even if the figure just flashed through the water very quickly, Sumyu still caught it. A little bit of that figure. It was a big creature, very fast, and just looking at it made people feel depressed. What was that? Sumyu frowned tightly, and he was recalling it quickly in his mind. The plot in the original work. In the original work, there are many strange creatures in this ghost cave. Sumyu silently recalled the scene in the original work and knew that there was a very huge strange snake in it, but apart from the huge strange snake besides, are there any other huge creatures? Sumyu didn't dare to confirm, but it didn't stop him from being afraid of things in the water. At this moment, Mi Nayuping, Wang Fati, Hubei and Shirley Yang were standing by. Several people were still discussing how to deal with the floating corpse, and they didn't even notice that there was a dangerous approach in the water. If you ask me, we should just tie the black donkey's hooves to the bamboo pole and throw it at the floating corpse, Zhangzi. I don't believe it and have no reaction at this moment. Fatty Wang was almost irritable because of the floating corpse. Hubei shook his head and said, that won't work. Who knows if the floating corpse lying on its back in the water is already in a state of transformation? If so, they are two different creatures from Zhangzi. If you use the black donkey hooves used against Zhangzi to deal with ghosts, you will definitely come back in vain. Then you can give me a good idea? Fatty Wang spread his hands to express that he had no choice. Hubei was silent and suddenly said, why don't you just try it with glutinous rice first? I can't scatter the glutinous rice, it's too far. Then wait until it gets closer. No, it's too dangerous. Just when everyone was discussing in full swing, they suddenly heard a peacock shouting, pointing at the floating corpse in the water and shouting, look, it turned over. Underscore. Tomb Raider, Mary Shirley Young at the beginning. Author, October is fierce and cute. Chapter 209. Look, it turned over. I don't know if Peacock has adapted to it a little now, and he doesn't seem as scared as before. Now he can actually warn everyone, which is really a big improvement. After hearing this, everyone hurriedly looked over and were stunned for a moment. Dumbfounded. Sure enough, I saw the floating corpse that was still lying on its back floating on the water. At this time, it had completely turned over and turned into a prone position. What happened? Fatty Wang said in a panic. I do not know. Shirley Yang was also a little anxious. This sudden change caught everyone by surprise. Could it be that the current was too strong and the floating corpse was turned upside down? Mi Nayuping said. Shirley Yang shook her head when she heard this, pointed to that section of the river and said, the water there is gentle, so it is impossible for this situation to happen. Fatty Wang glanced at Hubei and suddenly said, could it be that old who just said that he was going to use glutinous rice to deal with it, and it heard it, so it is ready to come here to take revenge? When Hubei heard everything, he became anxious and said, damn it, fat man, don't talk nonsense and scare people. Damn it, fat man, stop talking nonsense and trying to scare people. Hubei was a little flustered, especially since Fatty Wang still swore about the floating corpse rice dumpling, because after hearing what he said and preparing to do something evil to him, he felt even more flustered. Seeing Hubei Yulin looking like a formidable enemy, Shirley Yang stood up and said comfortingly, don't worry, even if that Zhangzi wants to attack you, how can we just watch? Looking at Shirley Yang's general-like demeanor and her heroic appearance, it gave people a sense of convincing. Sumyu also saw the performance of the conversation between several people, and when he saw Shirley after Yang's move, he couldn't help but raise the corners of his mouth slightly. His wife is indeed the best. Thinking like this, there was a small pulling force behind him. He saw a petite and graceful figure, without leaving any trace, once again hiding in the air between him and Mi Nayuping. Judging from your behavior just now, would you think that you have ingrained the fear in your heart and are no longer afraid? Seeing the peacock's cautious look, Sumu couldn't help but change his sentence. The peacock wanted to retort loudly, but as soon as he popped his head up, he inadvertently took a look at the strange floating corpse, and then shrunk his head in despair. He walked back behind the two of them and said timidly, "I'm still scared. I didn't expect that being a guide for you would be so difficult. You must protect my safety." Such a cowardly and cute expression made people feel bright after seeing it. Sumu laughed out loud, and even Mina Yuping's eyes had a hint of laughter. "Don't worry, we will definitely send you back safely," Sumu laughed. Peacock stretched out his hand in front of him to make a prohibitive gesture, and then wailed, "Don't set a flag for me. I'm a little scared." Ha 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 ha. Sumu was really amused this time. He didn't expect that this peacock actually had some sense of humor. Even Mina Yuping was made to curl up the corners of his mouth slightly by her. He was considered a powerful person. At this time, the floating corpse was no more than 5 meters away from Sumu and their bamboo raft. Seeing that it was about to collide with their bamboo raft, Hubei closed his eyes, gritted his teeth, and took it out of his bag. "I came out of dingzy that I had prepared." All the glutinous rice talismans were caught in Hubei's hand, and even Fatty Wang began to prepare for the battle. "Don't forget the black donkey's hooves." Fat Wang suddenly bumped Hubei's shoulder and reminded him. Hubei looked stunned and quickly took out the black donkey hoof from the bag. Everything was ready and checked to be flawless. Hubei followed and took it from his pocket. He grabbed a handful of glutinous rice and came out. When he saw that the floating corpse was close enough, he immediately threw the glutinous rice in his hand towards the floating corpse. Hubei's intention was just to test it a little, but he didn't expect that the glutinous rice was scattered on the floating corpse. After landing on that ugly floating corpse, there was no reaction at all. Ah! Just when Hubei was still wondering why the glutinous rice didn't work, Fatty Wang next to him suddenly screamed loudly, which frightened Hubei so much that he almost slipped and fell. "What are you doing? Fatty, don't you know how scary people are? Comma. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Tomb Raider, Mary Shirley young at the beginning. Author, October is fierce and cute. Chapter 210. What are you doing? Fatty, don't you know how scary people are? Hubei complained. However, Fatty Wang didn't have time to explain anything. He pointed at the water and said, "Something suddenly jumped over just now." "Ah! Did you read it wrong?" "No." Hubei also looked into the water, but he only saw darkness and nothing. "Impossible. I clearly saw something jumping past, very fast," Fatty Wang argued. Hubei still looked suspicious, but Sumu on the side looked into the water and frowned slightly. Just when Fatty Wang was yelling, Sumu finally saw clearly what was running past below. It turned out to be a knife-tooth salmon. Saber-tooth salmon is a kind of fish that lives in the waters near 0 degrees near the Tropic of Cancer. It is generally the size of an adult's palm, has black pupils, mostly white sclera, and has a terrifyingly large mouth with 2 rows of saws growing in it. With its jagged but extremely sharp teeth, it is a very ferocious predator. It is recorded in the Buddhist scriptures that one year during the Asoka period of India, sword-tooth salmon caused a catastrophe. At that time, there was a great flood of the Ganges River that had never happened in a century. An underground river in the eastern Ghats poured into a nearby city, and also they brought countless saber-toothed salmon and killed countless people and animals in the city. This shows how ferocious the saber-toothed salmon are. Sumu didn't expect that there would be such a school of fish here, but he also understood why those blood-stained rivers appeared in this place. It must be the knife-tooth salmon. These knife-toothed salmon go crazy when they see blood. It must be these knife-toothed salmon that are tearing the flesh and blood like crazy under the corpse, causing the river to be filled with blood. And the reason why the floating corpse keeps moving is also found. It must be these knife-toothed salmon. While biting the corpse, he also moved it with him. Menjuping on the side seemed to have discovered something. He turned around and looked at Sumyu, and then in a tacit understanding, he immediately bent down and picked up the pennant on the bamboo raft, and then poked it towards the floating corpse. They all now understand that the floating corpse turned over just now was because of the corpse fraud, but because the bite of these sword-toothed salmon was too loud, which directly caused the floating corpse to turn over. Minayuping picked up the floating corpse with his bamboo pen. At this time, the floating corpse was close to their bamboo raft and was about to directly block the way of their bamboo raft. At this time, it must be moved away before they can continue. Let the bamboo raft drift down. Brother, what are you going to do? When Hubei and Fatty Wang saw Minayuping's actions, they were so frightened that they almost lost their minds and quickly exclaimed. Shirley Yang was about to say something, but Sumyu signaled that it was okay, and then she swallowed what she was about to say. Peacock was still very timid and hid behind the two people. When he saw Minayuping holding a bamboo pole to push the floating corpse, his face turned pale with fright. Minayuping did not speak, but concentrated on using the bamboo pole. Peng started to fiddle with the floating corpse, and then directly moved the floating corpse to the side, no longer stopping on the path of the bamboo raft. Huh? Why doesn't this Zongzi respond? Fat Wang looked suspiciously at the floating corpse that was moving violently before. Why did it stop moving as soon as the oil bottle was moved with a bamboo pole? Is that Zongzi also afraid of Brother Zhang? Hubei guessed. They all know that Sumyu's bloodline is special and has the effect of restraining Zongzi. It seems that Minayuping's bloodline is similar to Sumyu's. Now that they know that Zongzi changes under Minayuping's hands, being honest, Hubei and Fatty Wang also breathed a sigh of relief. The feeling of being prepared just now was really draining their mental energy. Brother, if I had known that Zongzi was so afraid of you, I should have let you get on it earlier. I was also worried that if our bamboo raft didn't touch the ground front and back, we would be killed by that Zongzi. As soon as Hubei said this, he patted his chest, as if his heart could finally be put back into his stomach. Minayuping didn't explain anything. After seeing that there was no obstruction from the floating corpse and that he could finally drift smoothly, he handed the penny to Sumyu, who was standing aside. Sumyu took the pennies and didn't care about the doubtful looks of others. He picked up the pennies and plunged it directly into the bottom of the floating corpse. The others were startled, and when they reacted, they saw that Sumyu had already raised the pennant. Damn it! What is that? Underscore, comma. Tomb Raider, Mary Shirley Young at the beginning. Author, October is fierce and cute. Chapter 211. Damn it! What is that? Fat Wang was so shocked that he cursed directly. Hubei, Shirley Yang, and Peacock were also startled by Sumyu's actions first, and then they were stabbed by the bamboo pole in Sumyu's hand. The creature that came up was startled. Is it a fish? Hubei took a closer look and saw clearly that the thing stuck in the top of the bamboo pole was actually a lively fish, and then looked back at Sumyu suspiciously. Why are you fishing for a fish? Even Shirley Yang didn't understand it. That's right, Sumyu, do you want to eat fish first? Fatty Wang looked at Sumyu in surprise, and then he couldn't laugh or cry and said, if you want to eat fish, let's eat somewhere else. I can't eat the fish in this place. What are you thinking about? When did I say I was going to eat fish? Sumyu laughed in anger and said angrily. Fatty Wang pointed at the pennies still in Sumyu's hand and said, you don't eat fish, why did you tie up a fish? But let's not talk about it, your fishing skills are really good. The rod went down fast and hard, and it hit the fish directly. Sumyu was speechless, too lazy to pay attention to this guy, and glanced at the stuffy oil bottle next to him. The stuffy oil bottle next to him took in what Sumyu meant, and without saying anything, he just used the flashlight in his hand to shine on the fish, and waited. After seeing the strange and terrifying appearance of the fish, everyone finally understood what Sumu meant. Under the illumination of the flashlight, the fish opened its mouth wide and kept swinging its tail, with its mouth full of jagged and sharp teeth, glowing like metal under the light of a flashlight. Damn it, what kind of fish is this? Why are the teeth so sharp? Fat Wang was startled and uttered a curse word. Hu Bei said with a serious look on his face, look at these sharp teeth, this is a piranha. After carefully observing the body and appearance of the fish, Shirley Yang confirmed this is a saber-toothed salmon. It is indeed a kind of piranha, and it lives in extremely ferocious groups. Oh my God, if I accidentally fell into the water, I would be bitten to death in an instant. Fatty Wang said in shock. So, that floating corpse came towards me just now, just because of these knife-tooth salmon? Hu Bei asked. Sumu nodded and said, that's true. While these fish were biting the corpse, they also brought the floating corpse with them. That's why we saw the floating corpse floating over. Then Hu Bei and Fatty Wang remembered that they had just thrown a bunch of glutinous rice at them when they thought the floating corpse was fake. They didn't expect that the result would be like this, and they couldn't help but blush with embarrassment. Fatty Wang was so generous that he forgot about the embarrassment in the blink of an eye. He looked at the saber-toothed salmon that had lost its vitality and wilted and said, you shouldn't. My eyesight is very good. At least I have to with a vision of 5.0, why didn't you see that it was a group of fish causing trouble? As he spoke, Fatty Wang looked back and forth at Sumu's stuffed oil bottle. Sumu had night eyes and he didn't say anything. It's definitely incomparable, but Minayuping actually saw that it was a group of fish causing trouble, which surprised Fatty Wang. Brother Zhang, your eyesight must be at least 5.2, right? Fatty Wang exclaimed. He was able to see the fish under the water. In addition to his excellent eyesight, he must have observed carefully enough to discover it so quickly. Thinking about this, Fatty Wang was very interested in the stuffy oil bottle. His admiration was even greater. Regarding Fatty Wang's praise, Minayuping still had that handsome face with a cold expression, and he could really grasp the word cold. Looking back, after the floating corpse was already some distance away from the bamboo raft, just when Fatty Wang was about to say something, a dark wind suddenly blew over, making everyone present feel that the hairs on their bodies stood on end at that moment. What happened? Why did the wind suddenly blow? Shirley Yang rubbed her arms and said suspiciously. Others also felt the cold wind. It was not very big, but it seemed to be as cold as blowing directly into the bones through clothes. Logically speaking, we have already entered the cave, and it is difficult for the wind outside to reach this location. Hu Bei also had a puzzled look on his face, frowning in thought. Sumu and Minayuping also frowned. They felt that this gust of wind seemed not that simple. What happened next directly confirmed their suspicions. Everyone just felt that the cold wind was blowing continuously, and it was getting colder and colder. Along with the cold wind, there was a roar like thousands of troops galloping. Damn it! It's a Yin soldier. Underscore, comma.